Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel Museology Insights. Today I am excited to kick off a new video series. While I'm sharing fundamental knowledge about museum studies in my other videos, I thought it would be fun to dive into more specific topics as well. So here I am with the first video of our series on contemporary art museums. In this video, I'll be talking about an artist who holds a special place in my heart and had left a significant mark in the art world, Yayoi Kusama and her art museum in Tokyo. It's a bit of a longer video, so grab your tea or coffee and settle in. Let's enjoy the ride together. Yayoi Kusama Museum is located in Shinjuku area of Tokyo. Here you can find many of Kusama's iconic works, including her famous dot-patterned pieces. But before we dive into the museum, let's get to know the artist behind these masterpieces. Yayoi Kusama was born on March 22, 1929, in the small town of Matsumoto in Nagano Prefecture, Japan. Kusama's family was wealthy and successful, involved in the seed-selling business and operating flowers greenhouses. She often visited these flower fields as a child. Her early interest in art was clear from a young age. Some of her first drawings depicted realistic portrayals of flowers, showcasing her meticulous attention to detail. However, Kusama's mother didn't support her artistic ambitions. Instead, she encouraged her daughter to live a more domestic and traditional life, focusing on marriage and family. At that time, a woman's desire for a strong career, particularly as an artist, was viewed as unseemly and unfeminine. Kusama's mother went as far as to label her artistic efforts as meaningless and futile. Additionally, Kusama's family life was marred by her parents' turbulent relationship. She recalls constant fighting between them, with her father even leaving the home for extended periods to stay in Tokyo. Kusama's father, Kamon Okamura, had several relationships that angered her mother, and unfortunately, Kusama was often used by her mother to monitor these affairs. This experience led Kusama to develop a distorted sense of sexuality at a young age, which would later be reflected in her art. Kusama began experiencing her early signs of psychosis during her childhood. Her mental health struggles and her unique perspective of the world often feature in discussions about her work. She recalls a moment when she became overwhelmed with anxiety while in a flower field. Her psychosis involved both visual and auditory hallucinations. Kusama describes here her voice turn into a dog's bark, witnessing talking flowers with human-like faces, and even seeing a talking pumpkin. The visual hallucinations were especially unsettling. She recalls a time when a pattern she saw on a tablecloth didn't disappear but engulfed her entire body. During these episodes, she felt as though she was entering a self-dissolution process and experienced the terrifying sensation of space and time stretching into infinity, pulling her in. She often faced visions of being encouraged, drawn by a lake, or seeing disturbing, multiplying dots filling her field of vision or webs obstructing her sight. These visions profoundly impacted her worldview and perception of infinity. To confront and understand these terrifying images, Kusama turned to art, trying to capture and communicate her visions through her work. Despite the challenge, she began to repeatedly draw these images in an effort to reconcile with them. Her childhood works clearly reflect these hallucinatory experiences. For instance, when she was 10, she drew a portrait of her mother, who was depicted covered in countless small dots, just as Kusama had seen her in her visions. Kusama was later diagnosed with depersonalization syndrome. During much of her childhood, Japan was embroiled in the Second Sino-Japanese War, and the country was experiencing a rise in militaristic, nationalistic, and imperialistic ideologies. It was a difficult time for any young girl seeking individuality through art. On December 7, 1941, Japan attacked Pearl Harbor, officially entering World War II. Kusama's classmates worked in textile factories, producing uniforms and parachutes, enduring long hours and food shortages. News of eating insects and straw to survive circulated in the press. During this time, Kusama contracted pneumonia and, while recovering, sketched wilted peonies with leaves eaten by worms. In addition to these harsh family conditions, gender inequality, and tense atmosphere, Kusama witnessed even greater tragedies. On August 6, 1945, the first atomic bomb was dropped on Hiroshima. 3 days later, Nagasaki was bombed. On December 15, Japan announced surrender, marking the end of the war. The destruction of Nagasaki was devastating. About 30% of the city was obliterated, particularly in the industrial district, and survivors suffered horrific injuries or radiation sickness. After finally graduating late from high school, Kusama convinced her family to let her leave home to pursue formal art education. She enrolled Kyoto Municipal School of Art and Crafts in 1948. Her mother wasn't supportive, but also she believed staying with a traditional family would keep her daughter under control. At the school, Yayoi Kusama studied Nihonga. Nihonga means a Japanese-style modern painting. But soon she realized the rigid rules and strict discipline didn't suit her, because Kusama was an artist who wanted to push boundaries and express her art freely. One of her favorite activities during this time was painting pumpkins. She first encountered these distinctive plants while walking in grandfather's field, and she vividly recalls one pumpkin speaking to her when she tried to pick it. At just 18 years old, Kusama won an award in a local art competition. Despite her youth, she continued developing her artistic skills. In her early works, such as the painting onions, she demonstrated her talent for optical illusions and depth, revealing her ability to create far more than simple dot patterns. The three realistic onions in the piece are strategically placed against a checkerboard background, enhancing their forms. Kusama soon realized the rigidity of Nihonga didn't suit her and returned home after only 1.5 years. One of the most notable surviving Nihonga works is Lingering Dream from 1949, a surreal sunflower landscape. The effects of war, her youth, and her ongoing artistic exploration are evident in works like Accumulation of the Corpses, Prisoner Surrounded by the Curtain of Depersonalization from 1950. The curtain-like turning wheels reflect her perception, and after being diagnosed with depersonalization syndrome, she added this subtitle to her work. At 23, Kusama opened her first solo exhibition at the Matsumoto Community Center, showcasing around 270 pieces that evoked forms like microscopic, cosmological, seeds, trees, and flowers. About 5 months later, she held the second solo exhibition with 280 works. At the time, she was creating 50 to 100 paintings every day. Some of the works in her second exhibition featured repetitive dot patterns that would later become her signature style. The renowned critic and surrealist poet Shuzo Taguchi wrote about the exhibition. The drawings seem to flow endlessly as though a dam has burst. The imaginary forms are not a fabrication but a symbolic manifestation of such a deep emotion. Here, the artist's breath turns into a natural flow, almost like handwriting. In 1954, Kusama held 2 solo exhibitions in Tokyo, one of which featured her painting Flower Bud No. 6. This watercolor was later chosen for the cover of Mizue, one of Japan's art magazines. 1 year later, the Brooklyn Museum included Kusama in their International Watercolor watercolor exhibition, selecting her as one of 12 Japanese artists featured. Kusama's family wasn't supportive of her professional efforts and passion. In the countryside, women growing up in traditional settings were not expected to dream of becoming artists. They were supposed to settle down, have children, and raise them. During that time, Kusama may have found resistance to marriage life due to the presence of American soldiers in the country that paved the way for change. Kusama continued to receive psychiatric treatment during these years. Her close circles writing state, "Psychiatry gave Kusama what her family denied her, the right to express herself and the freedom to be crazy." Kusama was now happy to introduce herself as the creator of psychoanalytic art. While the occupation brought constitutional benefits, such as granting women the right to vote, equality wasn't achieved in Japan's art institutions and daily life. In the mid-1950s, Kusama said, "Japan is still a feudal society and being woman there is still very difficult." Although she received praise in the Japanese art scene, her development as a female artist was limited. Most critics focused on her being a female artist. She didn't give up. And thanks to the occupation, 9 watercolor paintings to Kenneth Callahan, whom she saw in Life magazine. Callahan showed these works to Duzen, an American artist and gallery owner in Seattle. Duzen was so impressed by the works that she suggested Kusama hold an exhibition there in 1957. Duzen's letter determined Kusama's fate. She came across a book about American painter Georgia O'Keeffe. She was particularly influenced by her painting Black Iris. In 1955, she attended an art book exhibition in Tokyo, where she obtained O'Keeffe's contact details. Kusama kindly asked O'Keeffe if she could show her how to approach life, sending her 14 watercolor paintings. O'Keeffe replied, "Artists here struggle to make a living." O'Keeffe encouraged Kusama to go to New York, but also warned her about the fast-paced and harsh art world. O'Keeffe told Kusama, "Show your work to everyone you think might be interested." The rumors about her mental illness had left her vulnerable in her homeland. Japan was a small country that deeply underestimated women. To demonstrate her determination to start over, in 1956, she carried over 2,000 Nihonga-style artworks to the back of her house, chopped them with an axe, and then burned them. When she arrived to New York, she faced many challenges. She knew no one was hospitalized due to her mental health and lived in poverty, enduring many difficult nights. She recalls a time when she was so filled with pain or hunger that she would get out of bed, which was made from a door she found in a back alley, to paint. These paintings were often her infinity net paintings, which she began to explore in the late 1950s. In these paintings, Kusama carefully drew circles in a contrasting color on a canvas covered with a base color. She stated, "I tried to draw them as small as possible." These works immediately garnered attention at her first New York exhibition in 1959. At the Modern Japanese Paintings exhibition, these paintings were hypnotic works that explored the value of positive and negative space. Repetitive, fluctuating, and decentralized, these paintings stemmed from her emotions and visions. They carried expressive meaning as manifestations of her life experiences. Throughout her long career, she created countless infinity net paintings. The colors, size, and materials of the nets varied, but the process remained the same. Kusama recalls a painting session where the obsession so strong that the circle sparkles spilled off the canvas onto the walls and eventually her own body. Even when the canvas reached its traditional end, she continued to paint. She referred to this moment as the painter shedding their skin, which may reflect her new approach to her artwork, shifting toward environmental art. This idea of environmental art moving beyond the pre-established boundaries of a work of art. Despite gaining recognition, Kusama continued to face financial struggles. She spent most of the money she earned from exhibitions on expensive paints and large canvases used in her works. As she continued her artistic journey, the financial constraints led her to experiment with unconventional art materials, such as muslin fabric, egg cartons, and found furniture. This led to works such as label collages, egg carton wall installations, and her famous soft sculpture accumulation series, which contained phallic-like objects sewn by hands and placed on various items. The first accumulation piece was her armchair, made for the Green Gallery in Manhattan. This piece included a chair covered in phallic-like protrusions that were sewn and stuffed, placed in front of a wall made of egg cartons. The image was frightening and disturbing due to its complexity and the visual effects of accumulation. The pairing of these two works evokes the male-female binary Kusama explored in her early works. For instance, comparison of Stamen's penis and gun vagina. In Armchair, the two genders are in strong contrast. The active nature of the chair and the passive nature of the egg cartons come together. During this time, Kusama began to participate in exhibitions alongside artists like Andy Warhol and Robert Morris. In 1962, she worked on other soft sculpture pieces like sofas and chairs. And in the same year, she created a work called Suite. Suite was a piece where phallic objects were placed on a woman's skirt and jacket, with the entire piece, including the hanger, painted gold. However, the first solo exhibition of soft sculptures was in December 1963, titled Accumulation 1000 Boat Show. Kusama said, "Repeating objects over and over was my way of overcoming my fear." In the untitled Accumulation series, Kusama combines various forms of repetition to create a truly unique piece. In this work from 1966, Kusama is naked, covered with dotted patterns and leaning on a sofa covered with soft sculptures. This sofa is placed in front of a wall decorated with a net painting. Instead of jumping from one art form to another, Kusama combined and transformed complex life experiences, perhaps following a path that created a strong artistic presence in the world today. She often chose items related to her daily life, such as pens, high heels, nightstands, and vanity tables. In Traveling Life, a pair of high heels is shown climbing a staircase covered in white phallic objects. This piece reflects her acute awareness of the struggles women face in a male-dominated society, while also showing her determination to overcome these challenges. Unlike the female form often used in pop art of the time, Kusama's use of the male form was unique. Kusama was an artist who refused to settle into rigid categories to fulfill her beliefs and philosophy. Her appearance, personality, and beliefs bore many similarities to the hippie culture of 1960s New York City. From 1967 to 1972, she staged a series of guerrilla-style art performances known as happenings. Although other artists also performed in the happening style, Kusama's happenings led to an extraordinary diversification of her personal brand. These happenings were organized by Kusama, but performed by a group of hippie performers. Kusama recalls having dance performer teams with up to 200 members that she could easily call upon for her projects. The sexual revolution, a movement that associated the idea of sexual and reproductive freedom with a return to nature was a theme Kusama explored in her happenings. Common tools for expressing these themes included polka dots, nudity, dance, and group sexuality. This unconventional form of performance was a feature that boldly and unabashedly showcased Kusama's artistic vision. Her striking performances were social demonstrations that illustrated how her worldview could be applied to a broad audience. For example, in her happening at the Museum of Modern Art, Kusama criticized the museum as a modern art tomb by having nude performers pose at the fountain in front of the museum. By drawing attention with the event, Kusama pointed out that the museum had nothing to do with modernity, as it only showcased artists who had long since died, claiming that truly modern artists were dead. Many of her happenings, such as the anatomic explosion anti-war happening at the Brooklyn Bridge in 1968, included anti-war demonstrations. These happenings also featured actions like flag burning, indicating her destabilizing work with symbols. Her performance of living art highlighted and critiqued the archaic aspects of the sacred artistic institutions. Kusama had been against the ideas of war and extreme nationalism since childhood. Kusama's happenings played a significant role in spreading her message. Newspapers and television broadcasts discussed her works. As a result, she received both praise and criticism, with her obscenity and iconoclasm being particularly critiqued. For instance, Daily News magazine featured on its cover twice. It ran the headline, "But is it art?" mocking her happening at the Museum of Modern Art. Her works, often taking place in crowded public space, fostered strong interactions with the public. Kusama recalls receiving threatening phone calls at her studio, but her hippie entourage was usually ready to protect her from violence. Journalists covering her works often saw her surrounded by a large group of hippies. This led to her being recognized as the Queen of the Hippies. Recently, media outlets such as the New York Times and National Public Radio referred to Kusama as the Princess of Polka Dots. However, the use of polka dots as a tool for her visionary message was largely shaped by the happenings she performed in New York City. In these happenings, Kusama often painted polka dots on the bodies of nude performers. This combination of polka dots and nudity is intriguing due to the strong connection between skin and identity. In her happenings, Kusama also used brochures and press releases further spread her political and philosophical messages. This can be seen in her happening held in front of the Wall Street. In these brochures, it was written that people needed to break their addiction to stock market and that all the men in the Wall Street should be eradicated with polka dots. Through the polka dots, Kusama was using a new form of intentional depersonalization. Shortly after creating her first happening, Kusama began to turning more institutional initiatives to spread her message. Like the hippies, Kusama believed that love should be free from false and limiting social labels. In 1968, she organized a multi-part happening called Homosexual Wedding at her home in Soho. For this event, she founded the Church of the Self-Dissolution and referred to herself as the Priestess of Polka Dots. In this happening, Kusama performed a gay wedding almost half a century before it became illegal in America. During this happening, she said love must be liberated from all sexual restrictions in a society free from them. With her innovative, progressive approach, she designed a single dress for her newlyweds. With this piece, she advocated for free love and the rejection of gender norms. Kusama's happenings also included other ventures, one of which was a fashion company. Kusama recognized the cultural significance of clothing, and her work, including a company called the Nude Fashion Company, would criticize the nature of the fashion industry. While the fashion industry excessively focused on the body and encouraged consumers towards excess, Kusama's philosophy of disappearance advocated for a return to nature and the dissolution of the self. She considered both clothing and nudity in her fashion. In her new ventures, most of her goals remained the same. Kusama, who frequently used the iconic polka dot pattern in her work, also preferred unconventional methods of creation. For example, she made a single dress that could fit up to 25 people, and this one garment sold for 2,000 American dollars. As mentioned earlier, Kusama's interactions with the media in the 1960s gained both praise and criticism. Her use of the press to spread her message can also be seen in her participation at the 1966 Venice Biennale. Uninvited, Kusama organized a happening called Narcissus Garden. In this event, she was selling large, reflective spheres with a sign reading, "Your Narcissism for sale." This was a critique of the narcissism of elitist art and art collecting. This unauthorized art initiative openly questioned the wealthy art collectors who perpetuated art elitism. Additionally, this show made her the most famous artist at an event where she wasn't invited. And in 1965, we can see an interactive creation of Kusama's Mirrors Room. In the room, objects such as polka dot sculptures, lights, balloons, and paper are placed so they can be infinitely reflected from all directions. One of Kusama's first mirror room works, Palace Field, can be seen as an interactive creation. A person sees their own reflection infinitely, surrounded by a vast space of striking and polka dot phallic-shaped objects. In 1970, Kusama returned to Japan, which she described as sexually constipated, in an attempt to bring her naked revolution to the country. To ignite the revolution, she timed it with the Expo 70 Osaka Fair. She wanted to organize events like the Homo Parade and Naked Panorama for the opening, but conservative Japan didn't allow it. When she attempted to organize a midnight happening in Ginza, she was arrested and taken to the police station. Unable to endure the lewdness of the media attention any longer, Kusama left Japan again a month later, a country she deemed corrupt and fake, a fourth-class country. She then embarked on an extended European tour, establishing a base in Rome, where she held fashion shows and body painting performance. In 1974, Kusama's father passed away. Returning to her birthplace for the funeral, Kusama learned that her name had been erased from the Matsumoto Girls High School Association. Her mother, overwhelmed by her daughter's adventures, had visited the family graveyard where she prayed to her ancestors and expressed her wish that Yayoi had died as a child from the throat infection she had suffered. The Japanese press also labeled her with names like Queen of Scandals and Shameless Artist. In 1975, as both her professional and personal life hit rock bottom, Kusama fell into despair and was admitted to Seiwa Hospital. The artist, who lost Cornell in 1972 and her father after 2 years, expressed her grief in her Message of the Dead from the Hades exhibition. In 1977, Kusama made a radical decision to remain permanently at Seiwa Hospital. She set up a studio there and rented a nearby space for storage. Kusama was withdrawing from the world. Over the next 25 years, Kusama wrote and published more than 12 fictional works, a selection of poems, and an autobiography. In an interview, Kusama said, "I write poetry in Japan. There was no proper environment for poetry in New York. It was nothing but a daily struggle with the outside world." In her written works, she described her childhood in Japan as an opaque one and her youth as nothing but humiliation. She recounted how to become an art criminal far from Japan's traditional broken family structure. She had hidden her dowry money in the lining of her coat and underwear to travel to US. The Japanese press, however, subjected her to insults, calling her nosy female monster. And here we are, the Kanreki, a game-changer period in Japanese culture. In Japanese culture, Kanreki refers to a 60-year life cycle belief, meaning the time when one life cycle ends and another is about to begin. Kusama came to New York for the first time in 16 years and attended the opening. With this exhibition, Munro advocated for the inclusion of non-Western artists in international avant-garde narratives. Munro said it was time to reassess Eurocentric and gender-biased art history. With this exhibition, Kusama became the first Japanese artist to appear on the cover of Art in America and honor rarely bestowed. Concurrently, interest in her work began to grow. For Kusama, the international Renaissance period began. During this period, numerous exhibitions were held. Some of them include, in context, Yayoi Kusama, Soul Burning Flashes, Oxford Modern Art Museum, Brisbane Queensland Art Gallery. Kusama's works gained international visibility by being included in group exhibitions in venues such as Taipei, San Diego, and the Pompidou Center in Paris. In 1993 Venice Biennale, she returned not as a guerrilla artist but as an official participant. She became the first Japanese artist to hold an exhibition at the Biennale and the first woman to represent Japan. Due to concerns of her mental health, she traveled with a psychiatrist. For the event, she chose an iconic and unique outfit. She also gifted miniature pumpkins matching the pattern of her dress to visitors. The highlight of her exhibition was Mirror Room Pumpkin. At the center of the exhibition stood a room-sized box covered inside and out with mirrors. The piece featured a single peephole through which visitors could gaze into an infinite pumpkin-filled space. Pumpkin sculpture. Her sculpture pumpkin became the first outdoor artwork displayed on Naoshima, an island in Japan's Seto Inland Sea that was transformed into an art site. The piece quickly became one of the most beloved works on the island. In 1998, Kusama held over 30 exhibitions worldwide, from London and Paris to New York and Tokyo. Among the most significant was her major retrospective, Love Forever, Yayoi Kusama, 1958-1968, held at the Los Angeles County Museum of Art, and other influential exhibition took place at MoMA, New York, Walker Art Center, and Tokyo Museum of Contemporary Art. And the Obliteration Room. Kusama's Obliteration Room was first exhibited in 2002 at the Queensland Art Gallery. It later traveled to prestigious institutions such as the Smithsonian Museum and Sculpture Garden, as well as the Tate Museum. In this interactive installation, visitors enter an all-white room furnished with the white furniture. They are given colorful polka dot stickers to place anywhere they chose. Over time, the once clean and stark space becomes entirely covered in a vibrant, chaotic layer of dots. This piece explores Kusama's concept of obliteration. As polka dots accumulate, they obscure the individual forms of the furniture, making them indistinguishable. The dots act as a universal camouflage, erasing clear distinctions between objects. This recalls Kusama's polka dot happenings. The installation is particularly noteworthy for its participatory nature. Every visitor, regardless of their background, profession, gender, or age, contributes to the final state of artwork. In 2001, filmmaker Heather Lanz began working on a feature-length documentary about Kusama. Kusama Infinity was released in 2018. Yokohama Triennale. Kusama was the main attraction at the Yokohama Triennale in Japan. She installed an infinity mirror room offering an immersive experience of repeating images as well as the outdoor installation Narcissus Sea and Kusama's autobiography. In 2002, Kusama published her autobiography InfinityNet in Japan. In the book, she expressed her gratitude to America. America is truly the country that raised me. I owe my current success to it. Over the following years, she held numerous traveling exhibitions at biennales and triennials, including shows at Madrid Reina Sofia, Paris Centre Pompidou, and Tate Modern. And Kusama has many collaborations with fashion brands too. In 2011, Kusama collaborated with French cosmetics brand Lancôme, and in 2012, there is another collaboration between Yayoi Kusama and Louis Vuitton. The launch took place in New York in July 2012. At the time, an exhibition of her work was being held at the Whitney Museum. To promote the London show, 1 million polka dot covered subway maps were distributed. Meanwhile, the facade of Louis Vuitton's flagship store was adorned with giant black polka dots, while the window displays featured red and white polka dot inflatable tentacles. Kusama herself arrived at the event in polka dot wheelchair. According to a newspaper report, within a 5-block radius of 57th Street and 5th Avenue in New York, people could see nothing but polka dots. International recognition and influence. By the late 1980s, Kusama's international recognition grew, thanks in part to curator Monroe, who organized the CICA exhibition. Monroe remarked, as she has stated herself, Kusama's story resonates with young people worldwide. She is a woman who never married, overcame ongoing mental illness, and was a survivor of abuse, patriarchy, sexism, fascism, racism. She destroyed them all. In 1916, Time magazine named Kusama Person of the Year and included her among the 100 most influential people in the world. The same year, she received Japan's Order of Culture, making her the first woman in the country to be honored with this award. While she was once considered the disgrace of Matsumo City during her years in US, the city's art museum now takes pride in exhibiting works by its most famous artists. And finally, Yayoi Kusama Museum. Since 1977, Kusama has voluntarily resided at Seiwa Hospital in Tokyo's Shinjuku district. In 2017, she became the founder of her own museum. Designed by Kumi Sekkei architects, this earthquake-resistant 5-story building, a response to Kusama's deep fear during the 2011 earthquake, is located just across the street from her studio. The museum quickly became the top-ranked attraction on Time Out's global must-visit list. At the opening, curator commented, "Kusama's works have been exhibited in many famous museums, biennales, and triennials worldwide, but never before has she personally established a private museum for regular exhibitions. This museum offers an opportunity to deeply understand her unique and bold struggle as an avant-garde artist, and without a doubt, to experience her sincere belief in saving the world through love. Situated among ordinary apartment blocks in Tokyo's western suburbs, the five-story Yayoi Kusama Museum generated significant attention even before its official opening to the public. The museum's white walls and curved architectural lines provide a minimalist backdrop for dozens of colorful and black and white paintings displayed across its two main gallery spaces. The museum's website is well-designed, user-friendly, and minimalist too, where visitors can easily access all relevant details, from visiting hours to accessibility information for wheelchair users. The website also specifies which floors allow photography, ensuring visitors can prepare in advance for their trip. And the museum's website also offers a variety of educational content. The first of these is the Gallery Talk videos, which provide an overview of the main themes of the exhibitions on display each month. Another is the Museum Exploration Worksheets, which visitors can pick up at the reception desk, use while exploring the museum, and later take home as a keepsake. Of course, there are also printable materials available on the website to support children's learning through fun and games. The last item in the Learn section is the Kids Guides, which make Yayoi Kusama's life and works more accessible to children. These guides are both engaging and educational. The Yayoi Kusama Museum is delighted to offer a set that includes a video showcasing exhibition highlights and two sets of printed brochures, especially designed for elementary school students. This set is available to teachers at relevant elementary schools. The Yayoi Kusama Museum also makes effective use of social media, strengthening its communication through regular updates on its Instagram account. Near the reception area, there is a small museum shop where visitors can purchase souvenirs. The shop offers past exhibition catalogs, unique gifts, treats, and variety of exclusive museum merchandise. Now, let's take a look at some of the exhibited works. One of the highlights is an infinity room. Visitors can peek into this small mirrored chamber and experience an illusion of endless space. Even in the elevators and restrooms, one can pass through a polka-dot world. On the first floor, near the staircase, there is a door leading to an infinity room filled with glowing dotted pumpkins in the dark, giving visitors the feeling standing in an infinitive field. In 2020, the Flower Obsession Room transformed into an entirely different space through visitor participation. Let's take a look at how the room evolved from its initial setup to its final phase, almost as if everything had been consumed by flowers. The rooftop gallery welcomes visitors with one of the Kusama's large-scale installations. In this open-air section, you can sometimes see the artwork covered in snow or glistening in the rain, creating a romantic atmosphere. After admiring the piece, don't forget to turn back and take in the city view. Now, let's briefly go over the past exhibitions held at the museum. The vision of fantasy that we have never seen in this splendor. This exhibition presents 22 recent and brand new works by Yayoi Kusama, created over the past decade and shown for the first time in Japan or anywhere in the world. Infinity Mirrored Room, a wish for human happiness calling from beyond the universe. Souls of Women That Continue Forever. Midway between mystery and symbol, Yayoi Kusama's monochrome exhibition. I want you to look at my prospects for the future. Plants and I. And in one of her most profound and recent interviews, the legendary Kusama shares, "Since I was 5 or 10 years old, I've been painting from morning till night." She says, "There has not been a single day when I haven't painted. I still see hallucinations," she confesses. "Dots fly everywhere, on my dress, on the floor, on the things I carry, all over the house, on the ceiling, and I paint them. In every way, I want to pour my love into humanity and into a wonderful war-free society, she states. I want to live every day with the longing to fight for humanity. With my deepest love and gratitude to the highly esteemed Yayoi Kusama.